9? Kako ba do 9? Joj, kako sam čoreva, ništa ne vidim. Rekli smo da im damo kao 15 minuta, pošto je kasnio 15 minuta ručak. Eto. Okay, we are back. And everyone who's back from lunch, come back down because it's super empty in here without you. Okay, so we're going to start with a session that is going to deal with science journalism and science communication during the time when it's probably been the most important ever, and that's the time of the pandemic. We have online, oh, we have an echo. Moraš da isključiš ti svoj mic. So Amir Zulekic is with us from Germany. He couldn't be here in person, sadly. And he has a video blog or whatever that's called Znanium. And Jelena Kalinic is with us in person, and she has also a lot of different communication outlets that deal with science, which are a website that's dedicated to vaccines and proper information about vaccines. She has a blog, Quantum of Science. She writes for media news outlets, and in general really tries to promote science and scientific facts, especially about vaccines, immunization, and medicine in the last period. So, Jelena, could you give us an intro at like what it is that you do and what motivated you to start doing it, and how do you feel now compared to when you started?
Thank you, Thiana. Well, I was forced to do what I'm doing right now because the only plan I had in my life is to graduate biology, then go for MA, PhD, and become scientist. But unfortunately, this plan didn't work out because of many factors. That's a long story, but I couldn't get a job in the field of biology as a teacher assistant, as a scientist at the faculty. So I turned to another studying of Russian language, linguistics, and literature, which I finished, and I got an MA in literature. During my last years on these linguistics, soft science studies, I began to work for Al Jazeera because just I thought, okay, I know a lot of things about science, so it could be very easy for me to write something about science. That's how it started. And then I realized that I can produce some more materials than Al Jazeera can publish. On the last year of my MA studies, we had so-called creative writing sessions, and we had to write like blogs, like novels, poetry, and one of the tasks was how to make your own blog. And then after that task, I realized that, oh yeah, I could make my own blog about science. And then I called it just Quantum of Science. It was in 2015, in February, I think. So that's how the first blog, Quantum of Science, started. Then I realized that there's lots of content about vaccines, that people don't understand vaccines, that there's lots of fake news and disinformation about vaccines. So I started to publish on Quantum of Science content about vaccines, especially MMR vaccine for measles. And then there was too much content on the Quantum of Science. So I made up a new blog called vaccines.ba with a little help from UNICEF, Bosnia and Herzegovina, which was only about vaccines. And while I was
I want to ask you like an additional question. We've mentioned a couple of times today here that like these issues that we have today with anti-vaccination movement are not new and did not come from the pandemic. Could you give us like just a few words on that? Because in 2015, this was already a huge issue, and we already had like epidemics of almost eradicated diseases popping up here and there, and especially in the region.
Well, I felt it's an issue and that something should be done about it. It was even before 2015, because I know people who actually finished biology, and they spread misinformation about science and vaccines. Sorry, I have a little bit dry throat. So this is not a new story. This is not a new thing to deal with. And I felt that my responsibility was to say something evidence-based about vaccines. And because I'm a science journalist, in those days I was not science journalist. I was like science blogger. I couldn't call myself science journalist, but I felt it's my responsibility to fight misinformation. And I think that these misinformation about vaccines are even older than 2000s. And I know cases, people born in 80s, who were pretty sure that vaccines, DTaP vaccine for against diphtheria, tetanus, and whooping cough is something that causes epileptic epileptic seizures. So it's not. They just have the next vaccine to talk about it. First, it was, I know, smallpox vaccine, then it was DTaP vaccine in the 80s, and then in the 90s, it was the big ghost of vaccines and bad thing was the MMR vaccine. Now we have COVID-19 vaccine. So the same thing, the same narrative is repeating itself on different kinds of the vaccines. So it's not new.
Can we now go to you, Almir, and hear about like what it is that you do and what motivated you to start doing it? Yes, we see it well.
and the other part is our neural circuit remodeling. So we know that nervous system doesn't regenerate a lot. But we still know that sometimes people recover from stroke or from like accident. So we didn't know why. This is what Florence discovered in 2004, is that brain and the nervous system has capacity to reorganize itself, not regenerate, but reorganize. So this is what I do in like 80% of my awake time. However, when this pandemic started, we all got trapped at home, and I was reading the news, and I was actually following Jelena, and I was following some other science communicators, and I realized that science is so fascinating, and I was so bothered by the fact that people, some fake experts, go out and talk about science without actually understanding it. So I decided to spend a few months trying to build a setup, trying to get camera, learn about lights, filmmaking and stuff, and I decided to start a YouTube channel. So this YouTube channel is called Znanium, and here I deal with different topics, some that I'm personally interested, some that I think are interested for general public, and here I combine my passion for filmmaking and passion to communicate science to other people, because I do truly believe that science is super fascinating, and it's really sad that we are not able to communicate this to people for some reason, and that there's not enough people who are doing this. So some of the, this is my first video. Here I try to describe how we can control brain with lights. And this is one of the techniques I used in the lab before, and it's really fascinating that we can actually manipulate brain with the lights and control some of the functions. So this is how I decided to go publicly, which was really not that controversial because it was like a neutral scientific topics. As I was making more videos, I went more into what you would call probably a controversial topics. And this is about viruses, vaccines, debunking some fake experts. And this is where I feel there is more things to do. All the other topics are interesting, I think, they're fun, but there is something fundamental I want to communicate to other people about way we should think about science. So I do choose some topics, but then I try to really give some techniques people can use to think better as well. And this is briefly of what I do, how am I related to science communication, and I'm really looking forward to a discussion, because I think this is a perfect platform where Jelena and Tiana and I can actually communicate some of the topics, because some topics are quite broad, and it would be nice if we can narrow them down here. Maybe you vocalize your concerns, and we then try to discuss that. Thank you so much, and I'm really looking forward for you to participate in this workshop.
Thank you so much, Almir. This is like a really good segue into inviting everyone who was kind enough to join us after lunch to please jump in at any point with comments or questions. Just like raise your hands, we'll get you a mic, and you can go ahead and ask these two really, really interesting people about the interesting things that they're doing. And I'll also like latch on to one of the things I saw on your screen, which was called, I think, Science and Dr. Nestorovic or something like that, and go back to Jelena about that. So this is a person who is an actual doctor. He's a pulmonologist, or whatever that's called in English, pulmonologist, and he is a public person. He is a very frequent guest of several TV channels. He's from Serbia and has been a part of the coronavirus crisis center, whatever that was called, like a government body that was charged with taking care of pandemic response, which was quite insane, because this is the person that is like known for peddling anti-science, anti-evidence-based medicine, anti-reason things, I would dare say. So Jelena, could you give us a comment on like what's the like, how do we deal with this? These are people that do have medical backgrounds, they do have titles, they do have white coats, they have practice, some of them decades of practice in medicine, and then they appear as someone that is directly responsible for like putting out there completely nonsense claims in a time of a serious health crisis. What's your response? And then also, there's a question to the both of you. I would like to hear from both of you.
Well, yeah, experts gone wild. I think that it's the most frustrating thing that I've encountered in my career, not only during the COVID-19 pandemics, but even before it. Yeah, I hope that we all remember, or at least that you've seen some media outlets showing that Nobel Prize winner Luc Montagnier said that in SARS coronavirus, there are sequences of HIV or something like that. We all witnessed quite a few, not a few, but a bunch of the experts, like real experts, not people who finished some online course, but physicians, even scientists who were talking pretty unscientific things, things they were talking without hard evidence. And right now we can see certain doctors, for example, I would say Ryan Cole from Idaho, who is very pro-ivermectin doctor. He's a real dermatologist. He's a real doctor. Then, yeah, Pierre Corey, who is also a real doctor, and they are all in this pro-ivermectin kind of a thing. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the ivermectin scandal, I would call it scandal, the antiparasitic drug that is promoted as COVID-19 vaccine. Anyone? Just raise your hands if you know for that. Okay. So
anyone who's not a fact checker heard of this issue?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah. So I find it very frustrating to see those experts going wild. But the thing is, it is harder to see what is pseudoscience and what is real science, even for us who are in science. Sometimes it's very hard to make a difference. Yeah, we all say, yeah, it's so easy. Pseudoscience uses a mumbo-jumbo kind of a slang which recalls slang science terms, but it's not like that. It is something that tries to sell you something. But in fact, it's very hard to see what is hard evidence, real science, and on the other hand, pseudoscience. I will go back to the ivermectin case. For example, there are meta-studies in those circles who promote ivermectin, which are actually saying that ivermectin is good for COVID-19 treatment. But anyone who knows how to do real meta-studies, how they are done, how you actually choose what is going in the meta-study and what is not, what is junk, will see it's not real meta-study. It's not real meta-analysis. But for layman, it really says, it's meta-analysis. Maybe they heard that meta-analysis are the highest level of evidence. They say, okay, yeah, this is meta-analysis. This is the hard evidence. But it's not, because it's fake meta-analysis. So for me, when I try to fact check certain things, sometimes it's very hard to go through the real science papers. I'm just a biologist, and Amir, he is a neurobiologist, molecular biologist, and it's so hard to actually read a paper coming from some other field of study. You cannot go through it. It's so hard. And on the other hand, you have also one problem, that there are lots of preprint studies. And most of the people don't know what preprints are. Preprints are not peer-reviewed science papers. And now we have to ask ourselves, what are peer-reviewed science papers? Those papers are one that been through all the process of publishing. There's someone from the field, from the actual tiny little field, were looking at that paper and saying, okay, this is okay, these results are good, this is reliable, or this is not credible, and we will not publish it. But when you are dealing with the preprints, You don't have that. You don't have that confidence that it's a good science. So we really have to read it, and a lot of these preprints are not published, and a lot of disinformation are based on the preprints. I think that it's time to turn to Amir.
We've seen quite often these like preprint studies or researcher papers or whatever because they have some buzzword at some point and then they blow up online. Like some media, it reaches some media and they see this as like, this is going to be clicked on a lot, and then it just like becomes a thing, and it's then kind of disavowed a month later after it goes through the proper procedures. So we've seen that happen quite a bit during the pandemic. But then there's the issue of, and I think there's been a lot of talk about this within the science community, like you also cannot ignore them, because this is a new situation and the body of knowledge is still not vast and it's still being built, and you cannot ignore preprints either, because they may contain valuable new information that's going to be crucial in saving lives. So it's really hard, even for people who are familiar with how science works, let alone like super weak media scene that doesn't have resources to have specialized journalists, etc. Which like brings us back to the question that I asked, like what happens when someone with authority steps out in public and starts peddling not just like unverified information, but flat out nonsense that has nothing to do with science and has an aura of science around their head. And you've dealt with Nestorovic in specific, so maybe like it would be interesting to hear your view on the issue of these like false experts or experts gone wild, as you call them, but also like how did you think about approaching like debunking himself as such and the things that he says in your vlog?
Yana brought some really important points. However, I think we should go back to just trust, right? So of course, if someone is a known medical doctor who worked for so many years and they start saying some reckless things, nonsense, people trust them. And I think this is the part, because if you don't have knowledge from a certain field, and as I mentioned earlier, and Yana also mentioned, science getting really specialized, you basically have no way to judge if this information is correct or not. The only thing you do cognitively is basically process if you trust this person or not. If you say I trust this person, then you basically trust the information this person tells you. If you don't, then you discard the information. So I think with him, it was really easy. He is basically really saying reckless and nonsense things. So this is, from scientific point of view, he's really easy to debunk. However, the question is, why do these people emerge, right? And I think I would like to give some basic guidelines on this. First thing, there is no 100% consensus on anything, literally nothing. Even something that is a pure fact, there is no 100% consensus. And this is what people have to accept. The world is not black and white. So there will always be some people who disagree, right? I think this is something important to keep in mind. Second thing, brain is an organ, right? As kidney can fail, as lungs can fail, brain can fail as well. So someone who is 70 years old, 75 years old, they can have multiple Nobel Prizes, right? But their brain can also deteriorate at some point. This is why we also have to be careful with taking information from one person. And this is really related to the fact that we have to look at the general scientific consensus. We should stop seeking for this one person that will tell us all things or like give us all guides to life. No, we have to really be guided by general scientific consensus. What is it that majority of scientists are saying? And this is our best guess. Maybe they can make a mistake, and that's possible actually. But as humans, science and scientific consensus is the best thing we can get. And we have to somehow, during the education, we forgot to teach this to people. Our educational system completely failed. We didn't teach people basic logic. And these are some of the things that we are dealing with now. All of these are just products of a failed educational system that was basically, when people finish school or university, they just don't want to read a book anymore. They just hate everything knowledge related. And this is something that has deeper roots. And there is one more thing I want to mention, and people have to be careful of this, is opportunism, right? This is a time where you can go out, say something reckless, get millions of views on YouTube, get millions of dollars as well for that, or at least thousands, and earn really well on saying stuff that make no sense. So this is time of people who have no scientific or ethical rules. And if you go out and you say something reckless, it takes hundreds of scientists to go back and fix that. And it's so easy to go out and say something that makes no sense, like, as you mentioned, ivermectin, right? Suggest people to take a horse drug that is not tested. And of course, if the general public doesn't have basic understanding of science and biology, they will do it because they trust those people. So yeah, I mean, I could talk about this for like hours because this is something that personally I think is maybe the most important question of 21st century. This is a question that we will have to deal in the next decades because of all the big existential issues we have as species, like pandemics or climate crisis, for example.
We have a question or a comment from someone there.
Daniela from Belgrade. Hi. Actually, for me also, this is really, hi Almir, and hi to Elena. I'm really passionate about this topic as well, and this is not only about science. I mean, we're living in a world of fake news, definitely, and it's my impression that we don't care what is true or not anymore. I mean, it's kind of, when I talk to people, it's just when the information pleasures the mind, that you think that you know something, it's enough. I mean, I don't care if it is the truth or not. So we are kind of, what is interesting for me, and I would like to see some research done on that, how some information, I mean, some fake news become viral and why some other not. But you mentioned Almir, you mentioned a few things that are really relevant for this, and that is trust. My question here is when we, I mean, for example, in Serbia, we have a lot in public figures talking nonsense, of course. I mean, I call this in our language shotometria. They just say some number, you know, who cares? I mean, nobody cares. Nobody actually fact check it. When we talk about science, it's even more important, especially during pandemic, when we actually talk about emergency, about survival, health, and it's, you know, somebody can die, actually. So since everybody can spread fake news and everybody takes some information and thinks it is true, my question here is, who should be held accountable for fact-checking? And this is a question that is not quite trivial because, I mean, we can say that everybody should be held accountable. We should all fact-check, but I'm not sure that's the answer for that. Should be science community the one who should sit in, you know, some science research institutes and do the fact-checking? Again, not. I mean, this is a really huge problem. Or we maybe should have some governmental body. I know how that sounds in our region. It's almost impossible to imagine, but if we had that kind of, you know, governmental body that would be, you know, there in the front line when some information become viral, that they can react promptly before some scientific community. I mean, you're actually not, it's not your responsibility to do that, right? I mean, you do that as your personal responsibility, I suppose. I'm not sure what are your values. But anyhow, my question is, who should be held accountable for that? Who should be the one in the front line and do fact-checking when it's important? And maybe that way we wouldn't have that much people who go public, like doctors, and say some, you know, provisional things and say, I think that, I mean. So, yeah, that would be it. Thanks.
I will try to answer this question. Well, it's very interesting. I don't think that in the countries which emerged from ex-Yugoslavia, it's possible to make a governmental agency body to control fake news, because the citizens already don't have a trust in government, and all this mess with people who don't trust health institutes, ministries of health, is because they don't trust governmental institutions, and it's it's on the border with censorship. So it's very it's a thin line. I wouldn't recommend that anyone from government do those kinds of a thing. On the other hand, do science have those kinds of filter? Of course, that it has. If it's peer-reviewed and published in some magazine which has a high impact factor, such as Nature or Science, it's pretty, you can be pretty sure that it's factual, it's evidence-based. You can check, we have Cochrane. We have a great, beautiful Cochrane network, which actually serves as a fact-checking in health and medical kind of a thing. So they will say that we have lots of evidence for that and not lots of evidence for that. Science has fact-checking. So, and now it's a whole community of fact-checkers who were working even before the pandemic. But the whole thing with fact-checking is more broader than science, checking things coming from science or pseudoscience. So, yeah, it's very hard.
Exactly, just, I agree completely. I didn't want to go in favor of governmental body. I would just
I
as one of the alternatives. But the thing is that when you say science does it already, the thing is it become pretty much random how it gets to the broader public. That's the problem. And when you have the thing that information flow randomly, then you have that some problematic things scale and become viral, and then we have situation like this. Medical stuff, which are not medical stuff, and kinds of that. I'm talking about broader accountability, just in favor of having any kind of control, so we don't have this kind of problems of, But
I wanna jump in and take it back to Almir with additional question to the one that you posed, and that is like, what is science community here? Do we have that? So, and when we're talking about STEM, when we're talking about like science and in that like strict sense, you have, I think, a very good perspective on that as someone who is doing research and science and have left this region and is now doing it somewhere else. So, like, how should science communicate? Do we have scientific community that is able to communicate with the broader public in crisis situations such as this one? And if we don't, then like, what's the replacement? Is there a replacement for something like that? Because it's also institutional. It has a lot of levels where I think we're failing deeply. It's not just like the regular education that is not equipping people with like tools of cognition about these issues. It's also like the, where are these communicators from the field here in this specific region?
Just briefly comment on the previous, really like few sentences. I think it's important that there has to be consequences. There is no way we can fact check each individual sentence. So if you are a doctor that goes publicly and say that this is the most laughable virus in the history of the viruses, you lose a license and you go back to do an exam of basic microbiology, basic immunology, basic epidemiology, and then you try to study again and get the license. So this is the whole problem. This just goes to not just science, this goes to almost all spheres of our lives there, is that there is no accountability for anything. You can go publicly, say whatever you want, but politically, you can say whatever you want, medically, scientifically, there is zero accountability. And this has to go from there. There is no way you can fact check each individual sentence and then try to stop it. No, we have to solve the roots of the sources of this misinformation spread. And this is really important. Of course, you mentioned that's like censors in media and stuff. You cannot hear different voices. This is one of the other more deeper problems. I'll go back now to your question, Tiana. I think it's, of course there's scientific community. There are people who finished universities. There are people who try to do science. There are people who try to do best with what they have. But then the infrastructure of science, just whole STEM field, is not really strong. There's not enough institutes. There is not enough governmental support. There is not enough grants. There is not enough money. There is not enough positions. So then people start turning to something that's not science. So they have to pretend as they are doing science because that's what they actually want to do, but they are not doing real science. And this I noticed when I actually moved first to France, and then now I'm in Germany doing my PhD, is the resources are just enormous. And there is no way we can compete there at all. And this is a big problem. You don't get to be exposed as a scientist to a whole range of techniques, whole range of things you need to do, money to need to do science. Yeah, I think there are, of course, really good people there as well. And you see that when they come here, like where they get the resources, they're among the best. But it's really the fact that we have so few positions that makes, that is posing problems. And again, going back to more deeper issues. And I think what is really sad is that we become a bit cynical over time living in that type of environment, because you really want to do something that is science, but in the end you end up doing something else. And then I remember when I wanted to study like neurobiology, and people were telling me like, oh yeah, why would you do that? There is not enough money in that. You should go move more to something that is business-like oriented, pharma and stuff. And of course, people mean the best because you don't have resources. And this is one of the things. And I do think that they are really competent people back there in our regions in general. Is that also, they are also not that loud, I would probably say.
Yeah, I don't want to be misunderstood. I know that there are super competent people, but the community is lacking because there's no infrastructure, because there's no network, because there's no habit of going to them, investing in them, etc., etc. This is what I think we lack. And then you have people like the aforementioned Nestorovic, who can like sell himself as an expert, because there's no checks and balances for those who pretend to be experts when they really are not. And we are not used to having actual experts in public discourse. And I think that you and I have discussed this a lot of times. Like, we see hesitation from people from the health and medicine community to speak out in public, which is in part a result of how media treat these issues. With the anti-vaccination, the whole anti-vaccination thing, we've had a lot of cases, and not cases, like how to say this, like a pattern of reporting this in false balance. You would get a person from some sort of institute that deals with immunization or public health, and then you would get a person whose specific education profile is like sociology or something like that. And this sociologist is talking about some made-up thousands of babies that died of vaccines in Bosnia. And she's completely like full of, you know what? And then this person that is an actual expert is put at the same level with her, and this happens repeatedly. At some point, she gives up. She doesn't want to talk to the media anymore. So the only voice that is left out there is this second one that is spreading nonsense. So this is something that I would like your comment on, because I think you're deeply familiar with how that goes in our specific case.
Yeah, the question of false balance in the media. When they, any media, TV, whatever, when they put like one person that is representing like 98 or whatever % of scientific stand on that issue, and on the another person is representing like 0.01. For the common people who are watching it, it looks like it's a 50-50 kind of a balance, but it's not. We have few problems with experts. I know they have this knowledge to talk about, but sometimes they don't know how to communicate it. You cannot simply say, it's so hard when you're talking live to make a reference on some science paper. It's very easy to say, yeah, the baby's died. It produces emotion and fear, hate and fear. But when you say, you know, there is a science paper which describes there is a Danish observational cohort study on 100,000 kids born in the 90s, yeah, it doesn't ring bells. You know, it doesn't produce emotion like the other person is using, yeah. So basically, spreaders of this information are using our primal emotions. These are hate and fear. And it's so easy to manipulate when you feel hate towards certain group or when you fear. And science a priori doesn't use that language. So we can do a few things. We can make science more engaging, emotional, like with Quantum of Science, YouTube, or with Znanium, and to produce people, next generations of people who would be more prone to science. But it's not, it's a long process. It's a process of 20, 30, whatever years. So we don't have time for that. Can we be more emotional talking about science, presenting science facts? Oh, yeah. Sometimes it sounds so foolish when you do that. For scientists to be a showman, it's not, it's a kind of a thing that they don't want to do. But the people like Nestorovic, they are really showmen. They know how to, how to act. Well, what to do then? We need to have packages for those science informations, something that is easily, that common people can easily understand. It's just really, animated and has lots of colors, and it's pretty simple. And to send a few very, very short, very, very deep messages. Just a few points. For example, I know we are doing, vaccines during COVID-19 vaccines during pregnancy. Yeah, they are safe. It's very important that pregnant people, receive these vaccines, but do it in a very simple way. One of the messages that I learned during working as a science journalist is that you have to make your message accountable and comprehensible to the people working on, in the supermarket. And that's where the science communication community jumps in. We actually have to translate scientists and science papers to general public. And that's the room for escape from the fake news, the room to develop. Because scientists themselves are actually, they don't have time, they really have to do work. If they are serious scientists, they don't want to do it in a simple way. They just refuse to do it in a simple way. And so we have to be to develop these community of science translators, and that's one of mine.
Yeah, I was just going to say that that's why I think your role is so super important, because you're someone who understands at least a large part of the concepts that we're talking about, and this self-criticism that you started with, I don't get all the super specialized studies, and it's hard for me to go through them because I don't have specialization in every specific field of my own science, is the reverse Dunning-Kruger syndrome that a lot of people are suffering from, and that is the less you know, the more you think you know, and you know a lot, and that's why you're kind of critical of your own knowledge. But that's a good thing in this case, because you know that you need to verify this with another person, and that you need extra layer of evidence, and then you'll be able to kind of translate it for the lay public that really doesn't get this and is going to be easily manipulated by someone who just as Daniela said, just gives a number out of nowhere. And that's something that's I mean, it's a thing, it's been recognized from before the pandemic, of course, in your case as well, in case of people like, I don't know, Neil deGrasse Tyson, who does great job of like communicating science in a humorous way or a funny way or whatever way with the general public that would otherwise maybe not ever learn about the topics that he's into. So this is something that I think why these conversations are also super important. I think you are waiting to say something. Go ahead.
Yes, this is Maciej Piasecki from Poland. You've mentioned 3 types of spreaders, if I'm correct. Like one of them are those aiming for YouTube views, like spreading something that's attractive. Another is under-skilled or under-researched journalists. And those people who might be delusional about their competences, like this dermatologist you've mentioned. But what about the state actors or like international organizations who might use it as weaponized misinformation? Do you think this is a major problem? And what are the vectors that we're seeing if it's being used? Like what types of actors, maybe what kind of specific organizations or countries are using that?
Could you give an example what you have in mind when you say international organizations? Because that part I'm not clear. Like, what do you think about?
Well, that's mostly the question to you. I was thinking like either maybe corporations who wants to benefit on some treatment that's not really effective, or maybe an organization that wants to sell their own vaccine that's underperforming, but they want to make themselves look better by just attacking their opponents.
I see Almir is nodding his head. Do you want to jump in?
One of the most important questions, again, going back to who we trust as well. This is something that is as well clear, and this is something that's as well documented, right? There are organizations that are really systemically working on spreading misinformations. They make handbooks on how to spread disinformations. They recruit people on social media. They know how algorithms of social media work really well. So they really profit of this. And I think there are multiple reasons for this. One you mentioned was probably conflict of interest, in the sense that there is one corporation or organization that has an interest profit-wise, and there are political reasons as well. And this is super clear to me during the last 1 year of being involved in public. I get attacked on Twitter and on YouTube by its organized comments. And there you see them, they're just reoccurring. They're just copy-paste comments, which are, for example, mostly targeted like that I'm paid by West to spread certain information, that I am, and they're all just copy-paste, right? So they are organized groups of people that, for some reason, we can discuss why, benefit from dividing societies in this way. And it's so easy. They actually really do it so well. They can politicize any topic. Like vaccination was one of the most stable scientific achievement, and they managed to politicize it. And this is something we have to talk about, actually. This is something we have to really see how we deal with these things. Sometimes some really good journalists come to good information, so we can really point out the names of the organizations, but most of them can be really well hidden, and you just see them through the pattern of the way they act on social medias. So definitely it is it's a big issue, because sometimes you think you're fighting your topic of vaccination, you think you're fighting your neighbors, you think you're fighting like some people who really don't understand science, but actually they're just a product of a bigger group of people or organizations who are well profited of them. Because we shouldn't forget that nowadays social media, the way the algorithms work, is by engagement, and there are organizations that are really well profiting on this as well. So that's a really important question. I cannot give you any detailed answers, but this is, from my experience, is really clear. There's a political involvement, and then there is as well just a profit interest as well.
Just a very short comment on the profit issue. there's a layer of this. You want to say something? There's a layer of this that is rarely discussed, and that is that peddling disinformation is a very profitable venture for makers of a lot of things that are not corporations, that are these like, you know, small or mid-sized businesses that make sugar water of different kinds, and then they sell it and they market it through anti-science disinformation. There's a really a well-known example of a website called Nature News or Nature News. Mike Adams, who calls himself a health ranger, she's like a really scary person that seems quite like sociopathic. And he is like a guy from the US who sells all sorts of supplements. I'm pretty sure he makes good money off of it. And then the way that he markets his products is he has this whole website that is just like solely dedicated to denigrating science and promoting these like natural, alternative, whatever medicine that his products are a part of. And these are not huge industries that are under public scrutiny. You will scrutinize Pfizer when they mess up, and you will scrutinize, I don't know, there's like this whole opioid crisis in the US where companies have been scrutinized for the damage that they did and the harm that they did to people. But you won't scrutinize Mike Adams. He flies under the radar of mainstream media.
Or Alex Jones.
Oh, well, I mean, Alex Jones is a case of his own.
He also sells supplements for like men and
So there's that layer of profiting on this information that is often overlooked because it doesn't have this flavor of being big and powerful like the corporations are, and it does a lot of damage, and all of them together do a lot of damage to people, to their bodies and minds. You wanted to go ahead and then Philip.
I would just add that the most disinformation right now are coming from like WASP, kind of a very conservative Christian circles in USA, very connected to you know, from the red states, connected to Republican Party, from Trumpist MAGA kind of a KAG circles. So yeah, it's political, it's organized, and it's very damaging.
Hi. Cool. I'm Philipp Stanovsky from Metamorphosis Foundation, and I would like to react to the question about who checks the fact checkers, because I think it's a very important question and it's raised by our audiences a lot. And of course we have the answer, other fact checkers check us, the public checks us, the International Fact-Checking Organization has set up a whole system to verify our credibility, and at the end, fact-checking in this form is a form of journalism, and it is under the scrutiny of the journalistic self-regulation mechanisms. And in normal countries, it should not be an issue whether the government would do it should have something to do with journalism or with science in the terms of the final decision maker. But I think many people, especially in our region, are asking this question, and the fact checkers need to be even more assertive, as the scientists, I think, should be, because to address the issue of ethics and the self-regulatory mechanisms. I think the fact checkers, the journalists and the scientists have much more in common than political decision makers, which are in the Western Balkans at least seen as the ultimate arbitrarians of what is truthful or what should be done, like we see with the measures against the pandemic, where the at least in many cases, political decisions has made the measures so inconsistent that it serves as an excuse for anti-vaxxers and other anti-science movements to undermine further the fight against the pandemic. I was also reminded, some of you mentioned that there is a very low support for science in the Western Balkans by the institutions compared to the Western Europe, because we should just see the budget that is allocated for science and scientific developments in our countries compared to the Western European in both relative and absolute terms, to see that there is very little future for actual scientists being developed through the educational system here, especially because usually the educational system is the first example of state capture after judiciary, where political parties have nested their dynasties of basically quasi-scientists who are at their best when they are doing nothing and just having sinecures in the, I don't know, national academies of arts and sciences, the universities, the state universities, and so on. I think it's a big problem because both with the pandemic and with the disinformation issues, we have seen very little, at least to my knowledge, of active involvement of science community, if we can call it like that, of the academic community, if we consider both scientific and academic educational institutions from these countries, even at the level of basics gathering of evidence. We don't have psychological studies, sociological studies, medical studies. Even the data about the pandemic is not usually available. For instance, let's say data about how many people who died have been vaccinated or not, and by which vaccines per segregated by sex, age, and so on. So I think we need, I will reiterate just in 2 sentences. I think fact checkers / journalists have much more in common with scientists because we are part of the something that's called Enlightenment philosophy, started in the 17th century or somewhere, which is evidence-based decision-making. I think the politicians who are basing their decisions on evidence are a very slim minority, and we need to help them to enter this mindset, which is under, how can I say, under pressure by medieval forces. In the sociological sense, it's democracy versus feudalism, but we see that we need much more support for basic science, and then the scientific popularization or making science more accessible to the general population is both something that is icing on the cake, but also the foundation of it, because if people don't understand basic science, it's very hard for them to become scientists when they're, I mean, for the kids, or to get into a career in this sense.
Yeah, I would also add that like understanding scientific method is maybe one of the biggest failures of our education systems because we leave it without that understanding. And when you like mention fact checking in the context of science, I'd said a lot of times like, are you journalists, are you media, etc. I was like, sure, we produce media content, but I think that we strive at least to be led more by the principles of the scientific method, so that the things that we do are separately, independently verifiable, that you can repeat the whole process. It's even in the IFCN code, like, can this methodology be replicated by an independent, different actor and reach the same result, which is something that's at the core of the scientific method. And this is something that we also try to kind of promote, because the idea, I'm sorry we didn't have time to go into that, and we're wildly over time, I'm aware, is that like how people, what people think research is. You hear a lot of usage of that word, saying like, I researched vaccines. You don't know the basic like building blocks of what immunization is, but you consider yourself a researcher of vaccines because you read articles or saw videos online. And these are the things that are like, I think, are deep structural flaws that we are all trying to put patches on. And it's not going to be, I'm afraid, anything more than that. Whatever we are doing, then patches, because it needs to be built up from scratch within the system that we don't have. Okay, I'll stop now. Thank you all. This is super fascinating, and I would love to continue this discussion, but we have to give the floor to the next panel. And thank you so much. And Almir, thanks for joining us from afar, far away. Okay, bye.
Hello everyone, my name is Amir Zulekic and I am the editor of Bosnian media fact-checking website. Thank you. Raskrinkavanje, and today I'm gonna talk about conspiracy theories with my colleagues. Okay, could just everybody else please turn off the mics so we don't have this terrible sound. Thank you. So today we are discussing conspiracy theories, and I'm gonna do that with my colleagues Maria from Creek, Milovan from Fake News Tragač, Ivana from Faktograf, Darwin from Raskrinkavanje from Montenegro, and Katarina from Oštro from Slovenia. And we also have Angie. Do we have Angie online? We should have
Hello.
Angie from Polintify joining us on. Yeah. Hello and welcome. So since we are talking about conspiracy theories, I want to start with conspiracy theorists. So the presentation, please. So we're gonna play a short quiz. So you're gonna see a few faces on the screen, and if you recognize the face or you know the name of the person, just please raise your hand. Do we know who is this? Is it possible that nobody knows who is this? Okay, we know this is David Icke. Thank you. Next picture. Who we have here? Yes, Mila Aličković. Thank you. Next one. A bit harder one. Do we have Carlos still here, maybe from Aldita? No, this is Juan Peney, source of globally popular theory about the sea salt as a cure for COVID. Next picture. Anyone, maybe? Yeah, your neighbor. So yeah, this is Branimir Nestorović. Thank you. Next one. Who do we have here? Yeah, we know this is Wolfgang from Germany. The next one. Local people. Yeah, we have someone who knows who is this. Erna Selimovic. Unfortunately, we know who it is. The next one, please. Who recognize this face? No one? Yeah, Alex Jones, thank you. Next one. Bit harder one. And we don't know the name, yeah, the US senator that won the election based on sharing conspiracy theories. The next one. Danica Grujic, that's also correct, from Serbia, and that would be it. Thank you for the presentation. So we just saw that we all have something in common. We know these faces. We know who they are. We know what they are talking, and even they come from different parts of the world. We all, at least some of us, recognize all of them. Some of them are prominent conspirators known even before the pandemic, just like David Icke or Alex Jones. Some of them are new faces that were totally anonymous before the pandemic and become superstars literally overnight based just on a single post. But we also seen some doctors and government and health officials, which is the fact that concerns me the most about the issues we are talking here today. But that's not the question we're gonna start with. I want to start with a question about the motivation behind creating and publishing conspiracy theories. What do you think? Are the people who are creating those theories really believing in it, or they are deliberately manipulating the people? I know it all depends from case to case, and it is both somehow true, but what do you think what dominates? And yeah, you just can answer whoever wants. I want to directly ask a person a question. So whoever wants to answer the first question, please go ahead.
May I?
Of course.
Hello, everyone. My name is Maria. I work as a journalist for raskrinkavanje.rs, fact-checking website from Belgrade. And I don't know the answer to that question. I personally think that many of them might believe what they're saying, because all the likes and shares and retweets and approvals they get actually make them more convinced they're right, because that's the way psychological mind operates. You think something, you say something, and then you believe something, and then you surround yourself with people who have similar opinion, and then some kind of similar information starts circulating in your circles. You find researches and information that actually confirm your worldview. So everything that you do and talk to people and all the people you surround yourself with, you all share the same worldview, and you're more and more convinced you're right. So I believe that maybe if they weren't in the beginning so sure that what they're claiming is true, by time, day by day, actually claiming this and getting approval on social media actually make them certain completely at some point that they're right. That's my opinion. But I do believe that maybe there are some of them who are not so convenient, are not so sure that they're right, that they actually are facing some challenges of their opinions and arguments, but they decide to ignore that because, you know, lying and like conspiracy theorists and fake news are more sexy and more shareable and likable and tweetable than saying the truth, which is not so sexy and not so appealing. So, and won't get you as many shares and likes as lie. So, that's it.
Thank you. And we have examples from both sides. We have, for example, Alex Jones that we saw earlier, and he admitted on a court trial that he's not believing in the stories he is spreading. He said that that's only the character he plays. On the other hand, we have a doctor from Bosnia, Sajma Dautovic, who is also spreading different conspiracy theories, and she admitted to us in an email that she sent to us that she really believes in everything that she speaks. And that is the thing I want to know. When we are talking about the doctors, about the highly educated people that are creating and spreading these stories, is it possible that they are also believing in those stories, or the conclusion is that since they have the education about the topic, if we are talking about the pandemic, the conclusion is that they are deliberately manipulating people?
Well, I think that some of them definitely believe in what they're saying. I mean, in Serbia we have a case of Mila Alečković, as you mentioned her on slide, and she's known for spreading conspiracies way before coronavirus. She was known for spreading false narratives that that corresponded with her previous session said that spreading fake news, actually conspiracy theories, corresponds with conservative viewership on politics. That's something that's true for Mila Alečković as well, but for some others, motives might be economic. They might be in some sort of financial gain from spreading different kinds of false narratives, and some of them, I think they just want to be seen, to get more retweets, likes, share, and that's their main motivation for spreading those conspiracy theories.
Thank you. And I honestly want it to be this option that you mentioned, that they are deliberately manipulating, because I just don't want to believe that doctors and highly educated people are really believing in all of these really, I'm looking for the word, stupid stories, let's call them like that. Okay, so let's now talk about the believers in those stories. There are some theories that are saying that older people and people with lower education are more likely to believe in such stories. On the other hand, some research showed that it is not true. At least when it comes to the Western Balkans, some research published in December said that there are no any patterns. Young and old people, less and high educated people, they all believe in same stories. I want to know, is there anything that makes the people to believe in those stories? Are there any kind of patterns and reasons why someone believes in conspiracy theories? Or we can say that we don't have any kind of patterns and it all comes to the case-to-case decision.
For me, when you look at the bigger picture, for me it is about education, because I mean there's been survey in Montenegro that says that around every fifth Montenegrin believes in conspiracy theories on COVID. The highest rate of those people is in African countries with lowest income and lowest education level, and people who believe the least in those conspiracy theories are people in Japan. So basically, I don't think that Montenegrin people are better educated and smarter, and that people in Japan are well educated and they tend not to believe those stories. So I think that it's really in tight relation with education or the lack of education.
But how can you, or Ivana, you wanted to say something?
I just wanted to add, basically he reminded me, for example, only 11% of Croatian citizens are given a chance to be educated about media literacy. So it also has a basis, it's also a basis for us to understand why people are susceptible to conspiracy theories. I also wanted to add that I wanted to add that in crisis times, and pandemics is a crisis times, it seems like people tend to believe in sources they usually believe in sources that kind of resonate with their experience, in sources that are telling the story in a simple way, and that's something that conspiracy theorists are basically exploiting. And the other thing is, and it was a theme of the previous panel, is a way official sources communicate data or some advices on how to fight coronavirus, and on the other hand there's oversimplified version, there's a version that kind of is based on our emotions, and those are two different kinds of communications, and it seems like the one that conspiracy theorists use is more is easier for people to kind of take into consideration.
Thank you. And Angie, could you please tell us what is the situation in the United States? I mentioned the research about the Western Balkans countries showing that there are no any patterns regarding this. What do you think about this issue, and what is the situation in USA?
Yes, for having me. Can you hear me all right? Does it sound okay?
Yeah, we do.
Great. I think we need more research to make broad-based statements, but I do think that we see a few things that suggest patterns. So I get older people are more susceptible. We also see young men often spreading conspiracy theories. And we have also noted some of the people who act on these conspiracy theories have had some sort of emotional trauma in their lives. So I think it's really important about what are the people who are believing in conspiracy theories getting out of this, because they're getting some sort of emotional satisfaction from it. And I think they feel comforted by it, that they feel like they have some sort of knowledge. So I do think that that emotional component can't be underestimated. And I also think that a lot of the people who spread misinformation are really attention seeking for whatever reasons. Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's psychological. And I think they have different attitudes whether they really believe what they're spreading or not.
Yeah, I totally understand the media literacy aspect that you mentioned, but the thing that I was thinking about is, for example, I saw a huge number of students of medicine, for example, or the doctors we have seen before on the screen who are creating and sharing these stories. I mean, they should know the topic, they should be the experts in the topic, but they're still believing. I think that is not connected with the media literacy, but more with about what you said, Angie, the different kind of motives that we haven't mentioned before, like traumas from childhood or attention-seeking people. I think that is maybe more close to the answer than the media literacy or the age that we talked about. I will get back to you soon. Just a quick question for Maria. I saw your article that you published, and which was about the Narodna Patrola, as far as I remember, a far-right group that created the channels, groups, pages, and shared huge amount of different conspiracy theories. What was your conclusion there? And is it maybe the ideology the thing that makes the difference here?
Well, when we talk about Narodne Patrole or public patrol, like far-right group in Serbia that is committed to fighting against migrant settlement in Serbia, even though there is no any settlement, but their core belief is based on fake news that the government is planning to and working on a plan to settle 700,000 migrants from Middle East to Serbia, and they use these pandemics and corona times to like distribute the message that the government is using lockdown to settle down migrants in villages in Serbia, even though it's not happening. But this is like fake news. That helped them gather more than 300,000 people on Facebook, like their supporters, and they organized few protests in 2020. They were asking the government to stop this settlement, which is not, I'm repeating this again, which is not happening. So it's, how I'd say, the ideology here is very important when we talk about conspiracy theories. This is completely based on my opinion and my impression. I don't have any statistics or researches that I'm basing this to, but I believe that people who believe in right-wing ideologies, who are nationalists, who are maybe radical religious people, who are strongly into fighting for superior Serbian identity and preserving our culture, etc. Those are people who you can make an educated guess about many of the like all their worldview they actually have. You can make an educated guess what are the other claims and theories they believe into. For example, those are people, it's more or less a rule. Those are people who believe that the government is settling migrants. Those are people who are anti-vaxxers, who don't want to get vaccines. Those are people who believe that pandemic and as well as migrant crisis is staged and organized by Bill Gates and George Soros and all those like villains in the world who are here for everything. For every crisis we have like Soros and Bill Gates to put all the blame on them. So those are people like 300,000 of people on Facebook who actually believe in these stories about migrants, stories about Bill Gates, stories about vaccines, etc. So yeah, I do think this that ideology in this case is a huge factor, and actually it's my impression that right-wingers are more prone to believe in conspiracy theories, which actually is confirmed in these pandemics, I believe, because those are people who are organizing protests against vaccination. That's it.
Thank you. I also think that it's not just Serbia, it's worldwide. Darwin, you wanted to say something.
I recently read an interesting study that actually says that believing in conspiracy theories is deeply rooted in folklore. In folklore, in this study, they connected it with Danish folklore. People once believed in witches. Witches were villains, and now basically Bill Gates is another perfect villain, like witches were once. He's everywhere. He uses technologies that many people do not understand. He's wealthy. So basically it could be all rooted in these traditional beliefs, and right-wing people, well, very often are in tight relations with traditions and folklore. So I think that's the reason why she said, right-wing people are mostly anti-vaxxers and spreading conspiracy theories.
Thank you. That's an interesting theory that I haven't heard before. Angie, what do you think about the ideology as an important factor about the issue? I recently viewed an TV show, I think it was NBC, I'm not sure, but it showed the map of the USA with the current places where there are the most cases of infection at the moment. And right after that, they showed the map of USA showing where Donald Trump won the election. And they are saying, and it can be seen on the maps, that there are some connections between the two maps, that places where the Trump won the election are, some of those places are now places with the highest number of COVID infections. What do you think about the ideology? I mean, in the United States, we have QAnon, which is almost, whose supporters are almost all supporters of Trump as well.
Well, I do think that there is a aspect of conspiracy theories. I wouldn't necessarily call it left versus right or right versus left. I would more call it authoritarian versus democratic. And I think what you see is these authoritarian impulses find conspiracy theories very convenient, because if you're posing a vast conspiracy that is harming people, an authoritarian response to it starts to seem very appealing. Whereas democracy is more messy, it's more oriented. And I do think in the US, unfortunately, right now, the public is not really, I'm trying to think the best way to say it. They've lost some patience with democracy, and people are not embracing democratic processes as effective and able to deal with their problems. And there's a lot of reasons for this. It's a very complex social phenomena. But as far as the conspiracy theory, they do seem to be used by people who are suggesting authoritarian solutions to social problems. And there definitely is that connection for sure.
Thank you, Angie. And Tiana wants to say something. Where do we... Darwin, just the microphone. Thank you.
Just wanted to jump in. I do know that there's research showing that people with right-wing ideologies are more prone to conspiracy theories, but I would definitely not go as far to say it's just them. And I think what Angie said is probably closer to the situation that we have, but there are very prominent conspiracy theories and people who subscribe to them that are not that either. So you have like a whole new age community, people who want to return to nature and stuff like that. And that community has been the source and the promoter and the propagator of a lot of conspiracy theories. Then you have like a whole left-wing leaning crowd that is into different kinds of conspiracy theories that will meet sometimes even with those from the right wing, such like paranoid fantasies about the New World Order and the world government and stuff like that. So you would have like anti-imperialist activists that are neither authoritarian nor right-wing, who subscribe to a lot of conspiracy theories because they like these very simplified, very easy to process explanations of the world and the political processes, et cetera, et cetera. So you would have like, I know, peace activists, people that you could really connect with on the level of values that are really deep into that kind of conspiratorial thinking. So we should be wary of that, like that this is really at all sides of all political spectrums. There's always a space for that.
And Angie mentioned one more interesting thing. You said that people are losing faith in democracy, as if I heard it good. I somehow believe also that the location and the country is also an important factor here. When I say that, I mean, for example, in Bosnia, it is the transition country, it is a poor democracy, there is a lot of corruption, a lot of criminal activities within the government's proven corruption and criminal activities, and the people don't believe to institutions and politicians and also the mainstream media. Is that also something which is important here? Katarina, you could maybe tell us what do you think about this and also reflect on the ideologies and the other aspects that we mentioned.
Yes, hi, my name is Katarina and I run a fact-checking project in Slovenia. I just wanted to add to all of those speakers who were talking about who are those who get and believe in conspiracy theories. I often hear that those people are just stupid and right-wing believers, but I don't think that's the right answer to everything. As Tiania said, those can be normal people and educated young people. I would say that they are just really they scared or just simply disappointment about society, about government. And as Ivana mentioned, they just want a simple answer to their problems in everyday lives. For example, my colleagues from faculty, they believe in conspiracy theories. I mean, I know them. And after I said that I got a vaccine, one of my colleagues asked me, why did you do that? Didn't you said that you want children one day? And after that, I sent her an analysis about vaccine and impacts on childbirth and etc. that we did with doctors and etc. And she simply replied to me that this is too complex. She doesn't have time to read this. She will just continue to believe that vaccine is bad for her and for her health and future children and etc. So I wouldn't stick to this stereotype that those people who share conspiracy theories are just radical or I don't know, strange, stupid people. We can't stick to that. I would say, they are scared and disappointment. And I think that why? there's a lot of reasons. For example, in Slovenia, we had a switch of government who had awful and very poor communication about importance of vaccination, and the government did some awful things about media and society in general. And my colleague of this, she simply doesn't believe the government, and the government promotes vaccination, so she won't get vaccinated. And that's it. There's no, I don't know, radical reason inside this. She is just scared, disappointment, and wants simple answer to their question. And there's no such thing in science.
Yeah, thank you. That was exactly the thing I was talking about. People have lost faith in democracy, in institutions and governments in general, and because of that, they just won't believe anything that comes from the institutions and mainstream media as well.
So also mainstream
may I
media.
add something more, one more
Of course.
point. I want to just make clear, I didn't say that only radical people believe in conspiracy theories. Everyone can believe in conspiracy theories. I said that based on my experience and my conversations with people from right-wing groups, and I spend a lot of time with them, talking to them, getting with them to their protests, etc., watching their TV appearances, etc., etc. My experience is that those people who share the worldview of public patrols in Serbia, many of them, most of them, I would say, actually do believe that pandemics as well as migrants crisis is staged. So this is the difference. I'm not saying that only radical right-wingers believe in conspiracy theories. I know many people actually in my micro society that believe in conspiracy theories and not radical or right-wing. So that's what I wanted to.
Their ideas, radical ideas, are also simple ideas, simple to understand, and therefore they're the, let's say, target group for conspiracy theories as well. As Ivana said, conspiracy theories are really simple and therefore attractive, and science, unfortunately, is really boring, really complex to understand, and not as sexy as conspiracy theories. That's where there are alignments with right-wing politics, with folklore, because folklore is also simplification of our fears, well, fears of our ancestors. There's rain, so we made up a god that produces rain, and that's a simple solution for weather. That's the same recipe for conspiracy theories. We make a simple solution for a complex problem that we do not understand. That's why we have a sea salt as a cure for coronavirus.
Thank you. I think that the most important conclusion on this issue is that we need more data. We need more research, and we cannot keep guessing. We need to know the right answers. So next issues I want to talk about is the popularity and reach of conspiracy theories content. So people, but also the media, who are creating and promoting conspiracy theories are gathering millions of views on YouTube and tens of thousands of likes, shares and interactions on other social media like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. But we also cannot forget the alternative social media platforms, as they call them, like BitChute, Gab, Rumble, Mevi, and all of the others that are popping up almost all the time. I want to know how is that possible? How and why they gather so much views, likes, reactions, and why do people share them that much? Is it only the message, only the content of that post, in sense that they are promising exclusive informations and new reveals, or is there anything else besides the message? Do they have some strategies, formats, things that they are doing while disseminating their content? Is there anything else, or is it just the message that makes them so viral and so popular online?
As he just said, I mean, it's easy to digest. It's easier than science. It's easier to watch a video of some guy yelling at camera that it's all made up, it's all, you know, controlled by billionaires, than to actually read a study and see the, you know, what that virus really is and how it works. And I think it's just that they have no different techniques and formats than other media and other popular people on social networks. They just offer something, you know, that's easy on someone's mind, and people out of fear and, you know, at this moment of crisis, they're ready to take that, you know, take what they are offering. So I don't think they have anything special behind them besides, you know, they basically, it's obvious that they have the knowledge how to use someone's fear and lack of knowledge, and so I think they have some special secrets.
Thank you. And do you all agree, or yeah, Maria, go ahead.
Yes, I would agree with both of you. However, I would notice that I have noticed actually that some of conspiracy theorists that I saw on YouTube, for example, they are really hyper productive. They have really a lot of content every single day, like lives and shorts and I don't know what. But basically, yes, I do think that their message is overly simplified, and people like to hear that. No one wants to listen to some geek engineer who talks 2 hours in some podcast about how 5G networks operate and how it doesn't have anything to do with coronavirus. It's too complicated, it's too scientific, it requires some kind of intellectual effort, and saying coronavirus doesn't exist or pandemic is staged, that doesn't require anything, and it's very easy to remember those kinds of statements. I don't know.
Yes, we have a question. Go ahead.
Hello. So it's not really a question. I'm sorry, I have to slightly disagree. I think this whole idea that somehow making decisions or evaluating arguments is hard and very stressful, and therefore we shouldn't expect people to be able to do this. I think that's false. I think everyone is perfectly capable of evaluating arguments. This is the basis of what people do, and there's good science supporting that, right? You put 10 people together, 2 of them previously have solved the test wrong, you give them 20 minutes, everyone agrees on the right solution. So I don't think that's the problem, right? I think a lot of what we're facing comes with us not understanding the underlying motivations or the actual, let's call it, instinctive reasoning that people commit to when they say vaccines are a bad idea. And for them, from my perspective, this whole scientific argumentation just isn't relevant. And one of my favorite examples of this is our reports from nurses in Slovenia who face parents who don't want to vaccinate their children. And they have to find a way in order to motivate these parents to actually vaccinate the children. And the argument, this is what they report, that works best, and I find this extremely fascinating, is when parents come and they say, okay, we don't want to vaccinate our children, the nurse says, well, but you know, if your child were ever want to go to study to a foreign university or Harvard or any other fancy institution, they're going to demand proof of vaccination. So you not vaccinating your child here and now actually harms them in the long run. And now this probably plays on this idea of your child being exceptional. And like a lot of people would say, this isn't the real argument, blah, blah, blah. Vaccines are good for other reasons. But this is what works. And if this works, I think this is what we should embrace, right? We shouldn't shy away. But basically what I'm trying to say, people don't have to agree with the arguments that you want them to, as long as they make the right thing, as long as they do the right thing. So as long as people get vaccinated, I don't think we should care whether or not this, their reasoning follows through with some high rationalistic standard of how we should judge these things.
Thank you. So I was hoping to hear if we as a fact-checking community can learn something from those people, but obviously not, as you all think, or most of you think the message is the only thing that is important. The next issue I want to talk about are opposing claims. So we have a situation that one person in one day believes that virus does not exist. Tomorrow, the same, or few days after that, the same person believes that the virus was made in a lab in Wuhan. The same person, few days after that, drinks ivermectin to cure or prevent the virus that he or she believes does not exist. How is that possible? Is this saying us that people who are trusting and sharing these stories are not really thinking about it, but just see it on their feed, maybe share it, believe it or not, and forget it tomorrow until the new story comes in? Or there is some other explanation, like maybe they're changing their minds. I want to hear from you, what do you think about these specific issues of same people believing totally different and opposing the theories and claims?
Yeah, I think I can answer to your question and to his remark in one say. They're afraid. It's not the same when you think about one fact when you're calm, when you're in a normal situation, and when you're in a pandemic, when you're in a dangerous situation that could be potentially fatal for you. When you find yourself in that situation, you're prone to accept any or every solution that is brought upon you. It's just a matter of your reasoning of those solutions, whether you're gonna believe in them or not. That's why we have a guy that believes that one day we do not have a coronavirus, and that that same guy that the second day drinks ivermectin, or I don't know, drinks sea salt for curing coronavirus. It's just that they're afraid, and that vast majority of conspiracy theories that they're bombarded with, they just find the solutions in them, and sometimes they do oppose one other, but they're okay with that because it's an X solution for them.
Thank you. Angie, do you maybe have some comment on thoughts about this?
Yes.
Please go ahead.
What we've seen in the US is people may be anti-vaccine, but then they get sick, and there's nothing like being confronted with the reality of your own physical illness. And then they have to, you know, they're looking for cures, they're looking for any sort of solution. In the US, we see a series of stories in the summer of people giving interviews to the media from the hospitals saying, I didn't believe in the vaccine and I'm dying and I'm so sorry that I didn't, and asking people to get vaccinated. Those were very powerful stories. I also did want to just comment on the social media aspect. We did have conspiracy theory internet in the US. They usually spread by mail. They call them chain letters. But there's no doubt in my mind that the social media and the algorithms really have turbocharged conspiracy theories. And the algorithms that seize on strong emotion are pushing conspiracy theories out in front of more people, because conspiracy theories do generate emotion. I think that's like one of the hallmarks of the conspiracy theory. And it's one thing, just to bring it back to COVID. I mean, it's one thing when the conspiracy theory is something far away and and not really confirmable. But COVID is something that people can and do experience in their everyday life. And so they do have to do these rearrangements. And also in the US, and I'm sure this is the same in Europe to some extent, like people really are, for lack of a better word, really into their teams. So like if friends, if their peer group says COVID doesn't exist, they'll say it doesn't exist. Their peer group says ivermectin's a cure, they'll say it's a cure. I mean, I see a lot of people who seem to be just taking their beliefs from their peer group without without a lot of independent investigation, and they kind of love their groups. Like the MAGA people, they're really into each other, and they're like, I mean, journalists have interviewed them, and they're like, oh, you know, before Trump, I was lonely, and now I have all these friends, and we do all these things together. So I think the thing that this conversation reminds me of is like the conspiracy theories are being fueled by multiple phenomena in society, and there's no way they would have gotten the traction in the US that they got without Donald Trump. Like his leadership of these conspiracy theories has made a real difference in their spread. So I know I'm throwing a lot out there, but there's a lot on that's fueling these conspiracy theories. It's not just one thing.
Thank you, Angie. Go ahead, Ivana.
I just wanted to add a quick note to a question you mentioned earlier about how is it possible for conspiracy theories to gain so much popularity or likes, views, and so on. I think part of the answer lays in the fact that basically basically conspiracy theorists united under a common narrative around COVID-19. So they basically had an infrastructure already, so it was easier to gain traction. And one thing I also wanted to note, and it's about previous question you asked, it's when we talked about doctors. I don't know. I don't have an answer about on the question why are they believing being scientists and all. But I think they should be held accountable for that. And there was, if I recall correctly, last spring there was a Reuters report, and they followed types, sources, and claims about COVID-19, and they basically what they found is that although, for example, politicians, celebrities, and other prominent public figures accounted only for made like 20% of claims they analyzed, they accounted for 68, 69, I can't recall correctly, 68 or 69% of total social media engagement. So they should be held accountable more than, let's just say, common disinformators or whatever.
But you want to say something, Ivana? But that happened already. Do we know some doctors and maybe other people that are spreading these theories but as you said, are not just regular people who are sharing, but they should have more responsibility than rest of us because they are doctors. And do you know maybe some example? And the question for everyone in the room: do we know any example of some kind of doctor or anyone else being responsible for the claims they made? I only know for the examples that some of the doctors were expelled from some of the associations or the organizations they were part of, but that is the only thing that I came across.
Actually,
sorry, pitaš da li je neko snosi odgovornost.
Da.
Well, in Serbia, we have a recent case of ivermectin drugs that was highly promoted by doctors. For example, 10 of them that were operating in this Viber group, giving people diagnosis and dosages, etc. And one of them actually lost his job in, he was a head of some clinics in Niš. He lost his that job, and I think there are 18 of them that are going to be yes, there's going to be a procedure in order to see whether they broke their ethical code, and maybe they will authorities are going to take their licenses, medical licenses. So that's kind of holding them accountable for what they did.
Thank you, and we have a question or another question from Aldo.
Thank you. Hi, Aldo from Albania. Hi. When we usually have a problem of this scale, and I mean we, all of us, we usually used to say, especially in previous points, follow the money. And I think even in this scenario between the conspiracy influencers and the fake news and everything that is happening and what is causing in our society, well, the first question is follow the money. And then, of course, these conspiracy influencers, they are gaining money out of it. But they are not the only one. Social media corporate, they are also gaining money out of it. And I believe money is always the best driver for good or for bad things to happen. When we were witnessing the Arab Revolution a couple of years ago, everybody was excited, you know, how good social media can promote, and because it's so free and because it's so easy to use from everyone to promote this sort of events and, you know, kind of people getting together and reacting towards authoritarian regime. But we forgot to think about another thing, I believe, which is who is regulating this kind of social media? Because we are trying to cope with this. We're talking about fact checkers and how fact checkers are good and who is fact checking the fact checkers and so on and so on. But to be fair and realistic, this is impossible. Like, we cannot deploy enough fact checkers to monitor all those social media that are out there. On the contrary, we have parallel examples such as the media. And when I talk the media, I'm talking about the traditional media. We have tons of regulation about the traditional media, but we have zero regulation when it comes to social media. And maybe one of the discussions should be starting also from here. Should we and how can we regulate social media? Because when we talk about fact checkers, for example, I wanted to give 2 examples to just explain what I'm trying to say. We already have developed platforms that can detect if a photo or a video that is being used in a tweet or Facebook account or whatever else, it's already being used somewhere else. And from that you can detect that if it's fake or not. Our simple question is, cannot the social media per se do already this, so pre-filter this in order to help us and the society and the divulgation of fake news? But I don't see this kind of debate happening out there. And I think we're trying and we're struggling a lot to go and follow all of these individuals, but we're not going to the source. And I think we should be going to the source in order to re-regulate this whole new platform where everybody is in. Now we're talking about metaverse, which is a new reality. But we haven't been able to open a discussion yet for the old traditional social media. We're already speaking about traditional social media and the new online media. So I think that it's impossible to go out in witch hunting conspiracy influencers. Rather than that, I believe that we should start talking about how can we regulate the social media. When Donald Trump, rightfully from our colleague over the States, was mentioning before, when Donald Trump was exaggerating and overdoing his power during the political campaign, because of the high pressure, most of the social media, they were forced to close his account. But this is going on a case by case, which we all know from our endless experiences that going case by case it's impossible. So we need to go back to the fact that should we start regulating the social media because they are in a sense of, even looking at them in a sense of monopolistic. So it's true that each of us can go into social media. We can open our account. But in the other way, as owners of social media, they are in a sort of monopolistic position, right? And they are the one which adopt specific algorithm, which we don't know how, and we don't know why, and we don't know for which purpose. They adopt specific algorithm on that specifies what am I going to get first in the news and what you're going to get first in the news and the other one and the one and so on and so on. Which, based on a very simple logic, this also should be not just transparent, but also regulated from all of us, not just from a group of individuals that do this in a dark room and nobody can access that.
Thank you. Yeah, we heard before this session interesting thoughts about regulating the social media, and I can definitely agree that the matching algorithms which you mentioned somehow should and must work better than they work now, in the sense that if fact checkers flag one claim on, let's say, Facebook, that Facebook should find all of the other appearances of the same claim better than it does now at this moment. But also you gave me a great introduction to my next and the last question. Thank you. It is about the solutions. What should we do to improve the situation, and can we do anything? On the one side, we have the solution you mentioned when it comes to the technology and the social media and the appearances of all those claims. And on the other hand, we have the issue of the solution to, or the changing situation with the people believing, deeply believing in conspiracy theories. Can we do something there? If someone, or let maybe change the question. Do we have anyone in the room who talked to conspiracy theorists or someone who deeply believes in conspiracy theories, and what were the reactions?
Yes, I had some conversations with people who believe in different conspiracy theories, not only about coronavirus. And my experience is that with the most radical people who believe the most in their I don't know, beliefs, okay, you don't have to argue with them, because they're not going to change their opinion. Of course, there are people, I don't want to seem very radical here. I'm well aware that I'm making some general assumptions for the sake of this conversation, but of course I'm not talking that all the people are difficult to change their opinions. Some people are more inquisitive, more open to question their own arguments and beliefs, etc. But many of them actually are difficult to change their opinions, especially if those opinions were presented publicly. That actually makes this belief-changing process even more difficult. And I would quote, and I would like to mention one great YouTuber from Serbia called Mario Vrećo. I don't know if you heard of him. If not, look him up. You're going to thank me later. He's a very intelligent young man from Belgrade who actually does debunking job. Basically, like fact-checking common conspiracy theories and fake news narratives. And he had one video about flat earth conspiracy theory, and I believe you all know that one of the most popular conspiracy theorists in the region is Mabus. I don't know if you heard of him actually. And he, in a video about him, said, you can pay a rocket, a spaceship to this man and send him to space for him to see with his own eyes that the Earth is round. And he is still going to claim that this is not true, Lucifer drugged me, Earth is flat, end of story. So rather than changing his opinion that can shake maybe his worldview and some parts of his identity, one will rather come up with some explanation that's going to preserve his worldview in order for this worldview to stay coherent and intact. So I believe it's difficult for people to change their opinions. However, that doesn't mean that us journalists and fact checkers should stop doing our job, of course. We can say the same thing for journalism in general. It's very difficult to change anything in a society, but that doesn't mean that we should stop working what we do. So that's my point. It's difficult, but we shouldn't stop.
Thank you. Yeah, some thinkings are that if someone deeply believes in conspiracy theories, that nothing can be done. Katarina, what do you think? Is it true? Or is it true that we can and should only work and have some results when talking with the people who are somewhere in between? They're not rejecting the theories, but they are still not deeply believing it. Is it true that that is the only target group that we can work with and we can make not to believe in conspiracy theories?
Before answering this question, I would go back to solutions. Yes, we can talk about self-regulation and regulation and more money from European institutions for fact-checking and stuff like that, and media literacy, where I deeply believe in few next decades and years. But we shouldn't forget about role of journalists and media also when we talk about solutions. I've been called a liar and corrupt person, as you probably all did, that you're doing fact-checking. And that's quite painful when you spend not only hours, but even weeks with one article. And when you're struggling as a non-profit media center to get the money that you can do your job. But some sort of understand this, let's say, a lie from that person who said that we are all lying. There are also disappointment lays in media who are making mistakes and lower their standards when they're reporting about stuff. So when we talk about solutions, we shouldn't forget about our standards and making a claim when we do mistake also, because fact-checking can go wrong sometimes, as in our organization we also made mistakes, so we should neglect also that.
Thank you. Yeah, they say that prevention is the best solution, but I think that when it comes to conspiracy theories, specifically about the pandemic, it is a bit too late for prevention. Angie, maybe you have some thoughts on the solution aspect. What should we do, improve, change, or should we just keep fact-checking individual claims and hope that our articles will reach the people it should reach?
I think there definitely needs to be continuous pressure on the social media companies to improve their practices around conspiracy theory, misinformation. And frankly, I'm very hopeful about what the European Union is doing in that regard, more hopeful than I am about the US government action. In this case, it may be EU leads the way, and then the US follows. I think there could be a lot of improvement just on that front. then I think we have to take societal-wide measures, and it's not just fact checkers, it's every sector of society, it's teachers, it's politicians, it's elected officials. I think we are part of a broad-based community that is in favor of evidence, logic, the scientific method that was mentioned. I think we need to keep fighting the good fight and setting standards so that when I think some of the conspiracy theories is a historic trend. There seems to be just kind of like a spasm of authoritarian thinking going on. I am optimistic that we'll eventually leave this cycle and go back toward a more rational kind of state of affairs, and we need our techniques that we use to continue through this period. So the long view, I think if you look at history and conspiracy theories and authoritarian regimes have their moment, but then they're pushed back because of the I think that people have an innate bias toward truth. They want truth. So I don't think like there's a, oh, here's the solution, now we fix it. I think we have to continue working and look for continuous improvement. That's my outlook for the near future.
Thank you, Angie. Does anybody else has something to add or comment, or someone from the audience maybe? Yes, just a second.
Sorry. Hvala. Thank you. I would agree with most of the what's been said so far. At Metamorphosis, we made research with one of our partners called the Eurothink in North Macedonia, and about why conspiracy theories are so impactful in our country. Our conclusion was that, I mean, the conclusion of the researchers was that there are systemic reasons for this, and this can only be addressed through systemic measures, starting from some of the issues you mentioned, quality of education and so on. But one other thing was mentioned in that research, and that was that there is influence that the perception of pathologization, I'm not sure if it's a right word in English, but to perceive the spread of disinformation as some sort of a disease is also framing our minds in one specific, in a way that might made us overlook some aspects or might not be so constructive, especially because labeling people through different ways might be a hindrance to our understanding the whole context and all the reasons why people succumb to these false narratives and ways of thinking. I'm not an expert in that field of psychology, and I would welcome input by experts in that field, because many of the types of behavior of people who are part of these groups, like you mentioned, is in denial to apply rules of logic, arguments, and to stick to some sort of narratives, which is similar to how people who are under influence of cults are behaving. And this term is widespread in the Western, let's say, public debates, cult psychology. I'm not sure if I use the right terms, but here in the Balkans, we don't actually have a discourse about cults, even though we face cult-like behavior all the time. And it includes not only, let's say, quasi-religious or other related practices related to magics or groups of people who succumb to charismatic leaders and then are used for crime and some sort of magical pseudo-religious or religious practice, but also to whole political movements, even political parties who are very cult-like in our version of democracy. They call them Sultan parties in North Macedonia, for instance. And I think it's an aspect that we need to take into consideration, that even though some analogies, like disinformation spreads like a virus and so on, are very useful, if we take these analogies too far and we treat people as, let's say, something they're not, it makes it harder for us to connect to them, to understand, and to establish the communication and trust. I'll end with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. And we are a bit out of time. Yes, we are done. Thank you, everyone. I think that, as I said before, we need much more data and much more research on this topic. And we at Zašto ne raskrinkavanje are very curious about the issues. And we even recently started working on a research about the conspiracy theories and about all of the aspects that we talked about today, like the motives behind the creation and dissemination of such stories, but also issues like how to approach and with what to people who are deeply believing in those stories, and are there any chances to changing their minds. So I am sure that we will definitely talk about these issues next point also, and while we are waiting the results of our research, keep doing great job, and thank you again, everyone.
Bosnian fact-checking platform. Now, I'm not talking about fact-checking. So, today with me are Arbab Dili, young entrepreneur from Kosovo, Silvana Doci from Albanian Institute of Science, and we have a huge crew from Montenegro, like it's not usual that like 4 people presenting one project, but we will see. They are Polina Cecina, Ana Ashanin, Stefan Vukovic, and Dusan Kovacevic. They are authors of Spectro, startup that help us to fight against wildfires. So we will start with this numerous Montenegrin crew, and I will pass mic to Paulina.
Yeah, working, okay. Thank you, Dalia, for introducing us. So, yeah. Thank you all also for staying. It's been a long day, and we really appreciate that you are still here, so thank you. My name is Paulina, and there are my colleagues here. And today we will present you Spectro and explain what does it have to do with this whole technology against fire thing. So, Spectro is our startup, which aim is to deal with a global problem with the help of a very simple and easy technological solution. So, we can go to the next slide. Please. Yeah. So, we are living in the age of a climate crisis. It's not about climate changes anymore. We crossed that line, and now the whole world is dealing with the consequences. And today we'll focus on one of them. Well, I'm sorry, my thoughts just got interrupted. So yeah, we'll focus on one of them. If you can just take back to the previous slide. And everyone in this room is a witness to a crucial ecological disaster which is happening all around the world, wildfires. And it's happening all around the planet during almost the whole year round. And with each year, it's more and more difficult to deal with it because of its range and unpredictability. So now we can go on to the next slide. Look at those numbers. Those are just some of the biggest wildfires which happened in the previous years. And look where they happened. It's not really a common or a normal thing for Siberian forests or for Northwest territories to catch on fire, isn't it? And we're talking about thousands and thousands of square kilometers burned. Those are thousands of hectares which are now ashes. And if we sum up just those numbers, not including all the other wildfires which happen in the meanwhile, it will be like more than 500,000 of burned land, which will not recover soon. 500,000, it is a number that is almost 35 times bigger than the territory of the whole Montenegro. So can you just imagine the size of the damaged area which we are talking about? And we can go to the next slide. So let's see what's happening in our region and what's happening in our neighborhood. Those numbers you see on the screen, this is the percentage of the territory of these countries which was burned in the wildfires. So as we can see, Albania and Montenegro both lost around 12% of its land due to wildfires. It seems like we have one more thing in common in our region. We cannot really control the fire and the destruction of our beautiful landscapes. We can go to the next one. Let's focus on Montenegro for a second. Those pictures you see, they are real and pretty fresh, actually, as well as those numbers. So, 3,125 wildfires happened during 2017. 72 wildfires appeared in only one day. There are more than 60,000 hectares which were burned in the period from 2010 till 2016. There are 7% of the territory of Montenegro which was destructed in 2012. And of course the estimated budget damage is more than 4 million euros. So, we can go on to the next slide and ask the question, can the technology do something?
We wouldn't be here today if the answer is no. But before we present the technological solution, let's take a look at the most popular non-technological solution people have used in the past or still use nowadays. We can go to the next slide. A fire lookout tower. Having in mind that this solution gave results all those years behind us, we decided to actually keep it. Hence the inspiration for the idea. But why does it need a modification? What is its main flaw? Well, the answer is quite simple, because people have to guard from these towers 24/7 in 3 shifts. And according to the robotics statement, which says, a machine should replace human in performing tasks that are periodically repeated in the same way, giving equal or greater reliability, keeping humans as their operators, we finally came to the conclusion that this should be digitized. And let's see how. Next. And one more. No, we should play the video. Okay, so we have a problem, but what you just saw was a stream that came from the most ordinary camera that recorded a wildfire. And the square that appeared were nothing but algorithm for recognition of smoke and fire based on deep neural networks. Next slide, please. So the whole process is quite simple from the user's point of view. And let me explain how the magic happens. First of all, the only requirement is having Internet Protocol cameras mounted on key points. They will be conducting video surveillance over the areas that have potential for the occurrence of a fire. Then, software will be doing processing of the stream video information using deep neural networks in real time. The third part of the process is fire detection in its early stages, and finally, alerting the local firefighters and our users to the presence of a fire and sending the exact location of where it happened. We believe that with the reaction of the fire service at the right time, the uncontrolled spread of fire can be avoided. Next slide, please. The solution given by Spectro is real-time video analytics using cloud-based artificial intelligence algorithms. The source of video information can be any affordable camera or even your smartphone. So we can go on the next slide. So Paulina and I cannot continue to talk about this topic without giving a software solution. So this is our architecture. So as you can see on the left side of the slide, our system is able to connect with different types of streaming video devices, which will all be connected on a cloud. From there, our clients will be able to monitor these areas through a live feed while providing us with available images that we will go through image frame extractor, and all in aim of automatically detecting fire. Next slide, please.
So yeah, right now we have one real development case, which means that we have one camera stated in Luštica Peninsula in Montenegro, and also Luštica is one of the most common targets for wildfires, especially the ones that happened in 2017, and the whole ecosystem of the peninsula was damaged and almost destroyed. So, with access to this camera, we can have 360-degree view of this location in real time, and we can test our algorithms on it. So it will be the first camera for implementing our software, And it was done with the support of the Telenor company and the government of Montenegro. Next slide.
For sure, the primary focus in our fight against the spread of fire is and always will be on green areas. Of the greatest importance on this planet are definitely forests, national parks, and all other green landscapes that provide us with life. But let's agree that any fire in this sense is an undesirable appearance, and except of losing green areas, we also risk safety and question the quality of the air we breathe. So a solution given by Spectro is so universal that it can be applied to other non-green surfaces such as oil gatherings, warehouses, factories, etc. The damage that a fire would cause in these areas would also be fatal. Next slide, please. Now we have an overview of other solutions that are offered in practice. I just want to mention that in the section for questions, we would like to hear your opinion on all of these. And according to our opinion and the information we have, the worst case is letting accidental passerbys report that a fire has occurred. We cannot leave our forests unprotected, especially not in the era when technology has become the part of our lifestyles. When it comes to sensor networks and drones, they share a common flow, a power supply. And also, can you imagine the amount of sensors needed to cover just one forest? When it comes to thermal cameras, the main flow they got is the budget. Because according to our information, the cheapest one costs about 5,000 euros, and those that are concentrated on fire detection reach a price up to 30,000 euros. So I will once again point out the benefit we have from the technology we decided to deal with, and that is turning any simple video streaming device into an intelligent fire detection service. Next slide, please.
Yeah, so in the conclusion, what we can say is that time is what really matters. And every second can be crucial. And that's the same when you are standing in the blank, so you got that feeling, right? And with the help of our software, we can contribute to winning this battle against the fire, or at least minimizing the damage. And we can go to the next slide. And just in the end, I would like shortly to introduce our team, which you can see here. Right now, Spectro has 4 members, and each of us has its own role and task to make Spectro even more spectacular and functional and develop the software. So here is Dusan, Anna, Stefan, and me, myself, and I, Paulina. And we can go to the last slide. Thank you all for your attention. If you want to follow our future development, you can follow us on the Instagram, and I would say just scan the QR code, but you cannot really scan it right now, unfortunately. You can write to us on this email, of course. If you have any kind of suggestions or questions, we appreciate all kind of feedback. And if you would like to talk to any of us in person, feel free to approach us till the end of this conference. And thank you very much for your attention. That's it.
Thank you very much. We will have chance for public to ask you a few questions if it's going to be. It is a very interesting platform, and I already prepared some questions if we will not have from public. So the next presentation will be from from Silvana Doci, Albanian Institute of Science, the organization which is like almost every year at the Point Conference, and they are presenting a lot of interesting projects concerning transparency of authorities. And now I will give a floor to Silvana.
Hello everyone. It's my first time here, and it's really a pleasure for me. I enjoy all the discussion until now. I represent Albanian Institute of Science. And as you know, as you maybe may know, Albanian Institute of Science is a promoter of open data in Albania and have on focus the transparency and accountability to government for residents in the country. So the topic that I have chosen to present here is about the public-private partnership, because it is a sector with a high risk in public finance in Albania. Please, if you can move the slides. So, you know that public-private partnerships are the arrangement between the government and between a private part. And these have a wide range of risk allocation and the funding option, and also different things that have to make with transparency. In Albania, in fact, PPP market is extremely active because there are 275 public-private partnership and concession contract there. And this is really a red flag for public finance in Albania, because of the fact that 35% of them, these contracts made 35% of GDP of Albania. And actually, due to the new news from our government, this percentage will increase, because we will have 7 more contracts that will add up this total contracts in Albania. Also, 50 contracts are with budget support. That means that our government have to pay a fee or have to make payments for these contracts to make them implemented in our country. Next slide, please. Well, in this slide, you can see that we are maybe the most courageous or the most bravest country in Europe, not only in Western Balkan, but also in Europe, because we have implemented concession and public-private partnership in different sectors. I mean, the mostly contracts are in the hydropower. Around 200 contracts of PPPs and concessions are in this sector. But also we have in transport sector and in the other sector like health, education, waste management, etc. Okay, maybe you can think that this is okay, you have some projects that have to implement in different sectors, but this concession or this project implies very liabilities for our country. This means that, for example, the contingent liabilities that maybe are not actual in our country, but they are potential liabilities, can damage all our public finance. Next slide, please. Well, as you can see from the figure here, the contingent liabilities from PPPs in Albania are the highest in all the Europe. And our organization have made the first attempt to calculate these contingent liabilities, and it is 11.6% of GDP. Let me be clear here in this point, because these contingent liabilities are only for 15 contracts that have budget support, not for all contracts with PPP or concession. So that means that if we take in consideration all these contracts, this percentage may be larger than it is actually. Also, our authorities, Ministry of Finance, doesn't calculate these liabilities that this market offers. But, as I said, we have tried to make this calculation just to tell not only our authorities, but also our citizens how much this can damage our public finance. If you can see from this data from Eurostat and also from our calculation, Albania is the riskiest country in this sector. That is very important for our government to take measures to mitigate all these contracts to make them implemented in reality, not only to be fictive contracts, not only in legal or to be not implemented in reality. Also, there are other factors, please, next slide, which imply this contingent liability to be in much higher percentage, like, for example, corruption level, and also the fact that many of contracts of concession and PPP have a long duration. And these also imply more liability for our public finance. Also, you should know that all these liabilities or all the concession and PPP contracts doesn't include in the debt that Ministry of Finance actually report in their reports. And this is also very risky, is a risky thing for our public finances, as I said. So to conclusion, I would say that our country have to make more PPPs for people. That means that they have to implement these PPPs to help or to make service that help our citizen there. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Silvana. And the last but not least is our colleague Arbab Dili. It is hard to pronounce your for me name and surname together. He will present us a very interesting training center, Roy Academy from Kosovo.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hi everyone, I'm Arbab Dili, founder and CEO of Roy Academy and Roytiv Group Ltd, two businesses. Roy Academy is a training center that is created 2 years ago. We are now in 3 countries, in Kosovo, Albania, and Macedonia, North Macedonia, I'm sorry. And our academy is offering online trainings and physical trainings also in Republic of Kosovo in the fields of technology and information, like digital marketing, graphic design, programming, cybersecurity, mobile application, and so on. We as an academy, we had a very great success in our first 2 years of the business because we started the trainings with internships. Every student that came to us, he earned 1 month training. After the training, he will get the certification. And after that, he will launch the internship at Roytiv Group. After the student will finish the internship process, he will get work reference. With this program, for each training, we achieved for young people in Republic of Kosovo, North Macedonia, and Albania to grow their work experience, to give them a profession, and to get them ready for getting a job or getting clients or opening an agency. I want to tell you my experience in the pandemic situation that we had before 2 years ago. It was a very shock moment because we didn't accept that everything was closed. But for the good faith, we had the biggest growing of our academy in the pandemic time. Till there, we was keeping the training just in class, physically. After that, we learned that we need to make the trainings online. For the first 6 months, we had a growing up for 400%. And in the pandemic time, we achieved to expand our business in Republic of North Macedonia and in Albania. Good news for us is that from this month, we started to invest in Croatia. We will open our academy. We are hoping to open after 3 months. We are starting to register students from Croatia, and we are achieving to have a very great success, of course, because of our professional team, our mission, and our vision. What I want to say also for pandemic is that all people all around the world, we had an experience of being isolated, that we can't do nothing, we can't work, we can't go out. But now it's easier. The pandemic situation was gone, and we started working, educating, going out. But there are some people that are still isolated in the term of education and working. They are the people with special needs. For that reason, our academy this year offered 120 scholarships for persons with special needs. They will earn 1 month training plus 1 more internship, certification and work reference, and our goal for them is to get them ready to get a job. Because in this year, in these days, everyone can get a job online, remotely, from every country. So, for us in Academy, we are very happy with these 2 years. The first year, our goal was to get 100 students per year. We achieved 1,000. Now, in second year, our goal is to get 100 students per month. The key of the success of all about this is first, a strong team. Second, investing in digital marketing. And of course, offering quality. So I don't want to have more discussion from me. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. I just wanted to share my experience of expanding a business online with investing just in team and in online marketing, and our contribution in people with personal needs. So thank you for the invitation and for the opportunity.
Thank you, Arb, for your presentation, and I will have one question for you. How many people you serviced through the years in your center, and how old are the users of your trainings, like people who are taking your trainings? And also, do you have funding or everything is commercial based?
Everything that we made till today is by self-financing. We didn't get any grant from government, from other organization. Even this donation that we are offering for 120 people is self-financing. About the students that can enroll our trainings, we don't have limitation on ages, because we have students 50 years old, which who after finish the training, she achieved to have 3 clients from Canada and to get a very big salary by living in Kosovo. We have students 11 years old, so we don't have limitation in ages.
Okay, before we give you a chance to ask questions, I will have a few questions for also for Spectro team, and one question for Albanian Institute of Science for Silvana. And maybe I will ask first Silvana question. What is happening with all those public-private partnerships in case of government change after the election, for example? If like a former government sign a contract with some organization, what's happening when some another government is coming? If it's like totally diametric opposed to previous government.
Well, thank you for question, but unfortunately nothing happens. It's going on. All the procedures are the same. All the new election that came, the people are the same again, and all the process is the same. So nothing is gonna change. I said before that now that new election has happened before in July. Until then, there are 7 more contracts that are planned to be implemented. So nothing's gonna change.
Yeah, but the opposition probably complaining about all those private companies before the election.
Okay, I have to say that our actual government have 8 years that is in the same position, so we don't have any change. Are the same people, so they don't have to complain with themselves. So that's the point that is very dangerous for our public finances. I see very risky thing because of this case. Of course, sometimes from opposite have some, let's say, some discussion about some contracts, but it's all last then. It's all doesn't explain very well what they want or what they want to check. So it is not. It's an unclear situation about this market.
Yeah, and I saw also that most of the contracts are concerning hydro energy. Is it like a small hydropower plants like in Bosnia or all around the Balkans? And what public thinks about it?
Well, yes, of course. The sector that have mostly of the contracts is the hydropower. But this has came because government has implied a new law that allow the private part to take implemented this project. All the hydropowers are big, are not small, over 2 megawatts. So I think that these hydropower are larger or are bigger than the hydropower in your country or in Western Balkan in general. But for this point, I would say that, okay, there are too many contracts in this sector, but they have, that have helped in our energy market because now all the citizens have more regular energy and all the energy market has stabilized. Even we make more export in energy than imports in these last years, comparing to before 10 or 15 years ago. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And now I will ask Spectrum guys, crew, one question. Let's say, how Spectre is different from another platforms that we can track online wildfires, such as Zoom Earth that is tracking through a satellite, or some other heat maps that we can in real time track actually where the problem is?
This works? Okay. Well, currently this is going to be focused on the region, so let's say Balkans. Currently there is not a solution that plans to work together with the government and the national reserves. First we're going to focus on Montenegro because we are starting there. And we're going to have a cooperation with the fire departments directly in Boka Kotor, a part where the Lurtica Peninsula is. So we can say that we're like taking matters into our hand to bring the solution to the front door, to the fire department and the people who will take action immediately. I think that's it.
Yeah, and how many cameras you are planning to put in Montenegro?
That's the point. This is our camera, like we provided it with the help of Telenor, but we will enable for anyone who has the IP camera to connect to our system. So anyone who wants to secure their property, their, let's say, either the government or either the private property, if they have cameras and they connect it to our system, it will be, I don't want to say protected because we're not the ones who are going to be putting out the fires. We're just the ones who are going to notify the people who are going to put out the fires on time.
And did you think to allow like a broader public, like citizens through the app to participate in this Spectro project, like with their smartphones or?
Yes, of course. As I said, any type of camera that connects to our system will be able to effectively be part of that system, of that, let's say, ecological system of AI detection for the wildfires. I will have to say that it will not be like publicly available, like, oh, okay, I want to connect, because it will put a strain into our systems. So until we are ready to scale it up, we are going to be the ones who are deciding, okay, we have a few more spaces to connect. It will be a contract-based thing.
Okay, so you don't think about application Spectro or something like that? It will be like public.
I don't think so.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, if anyone has any other question, okay.
Hi, I have a question for Spectro. First of all, are you an NGO or a company? I didn't get that in the beginning.
We are not an NGO. We don't plan to be an NGO.
So you're
We're going to be commercial, yes.
Oh, okay. So then the question is, how will you finance the rest of the cameras? And, you know, like scaling it up? And if the government is financing the ones that you're going to put up, I guess you have to do work as well? Like you will have to be paid for you to keep the system up.
So the first camera was like a donation from the Telenor company. And as I said, we will not be the ones who are putting up the cameras. The people who want to, let's say, join our system will have their own cameras. They will just give us access to their cameras. So we will not be financing the cameras, and the cameras there won't be a need for them to be too expensive. So
yeah, and does it involve work for you, like keeping the system going?
Yes, we will have to be upgrading our AI all the time. We will need to manage there will be a user interface available for all those clients, and the training of the AI needs to be done constantly, upgrading. The more data we have, the better it will be. Those data images need to be labeled. The process of labeling is done by humans. You take a picture and you label all the parts, where is smoke, where is fire, so that the AI will take that labeled picture and be able to understand better what represents fire and what represents smoke and what is not.
And just for the end, so basically you will be charging clients in the beginning to be in your system?
Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay, do we have any other question? Okay, we don't have any other public. Now there is like a small amount of people. Okay, guys, so thank you very much for these presentations. I know it was a long day, so people moved from this place to take a rest probably. And one technical information, now we're gonna screen the movie, and the movie is not 3 hours long as it is in the program, is it less than 30 minutes. So please join us to watch the movie, and we will finish this day today. Thank you very much.